The mockery, the galactic assembly chamber, buzzed with laughter as footage of Earth's latest rocket test played on the massive holographic display. The primitive chemical propulsion system exploded mid-flight, drawing howls of amusement from the UB, thousands of delegates representing the advanced civilizations of the Milky Way. "Another spectacular failure from the Mud Dwellers," announced Delegate Orntal of the Vesperian Dominion, his tentacle-fringed face rippling with mirth. "They still believe breaking their atmosphere is an achievement when the rest of us traverse dimensions." Dr. Valentina Sokolov watched the recording from her hidden observation pod, her weathered face betraying no emotion. For 20 years, she had monitored these assembly sessions, cataloging every insult, every dismissal of human potential. Each mockery fueled her determination. "Transmission complete," she whispered to her communicator. "Send the package to Antarctica base. Authorization, Sokolov Theta 9. 3 kilometers beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura received the data packet. His fingers, gnarled from radiation exposure, danced across the quantum interface. The chamber around him hummed with energy as calculations processed through crystalline matrices that operated beyond conventional physics. "They're still underestimating us," he said to the woman who approached from behind. "Perfect." Director Josephine Okoro nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the pulsing light of the dimensional core. "The Vesperian observer leaves tomorrow. His report will confirm what they all believe, that we're decades from achieving interstellar capability, while we're actually achieving something they consider impossible," Hiroshi said, gesturing to the massive structure that dominated the cavern. Etherian wasn't built. It was grown. Crystalline lattices interwoven with neural networks and quantum fields extended in configurations that hurt the human eye to follow. Parts of it existed in multiple states simultaneously, and sections seemed to vanish only to reappear, elsewhere without moving. "Is it ready?" Josephine asked. "The final calibrations are complete," Hiroshi confirmed. "The dimensional resonance is stable across all 7 planes. We can breach the higher dimensions without catastrophic timeline collapse." On the surface, at the McMurdo Research Station, Captain Javier Rodriguez maintained the facade. As the Dai-Nao Vesperian observer's ship prepared for departure, he played his role perfectly, the ambitious but limited human scientist, transparent in his desperation to impress the advanced alien visitor. "Perhaps next time we meet we'll have mastered fusion propulsion," Javier said with practiced humility. The Vesperian, a being of living crystal and gas, pulsed with condescending luminescence. "Perhaps in another century, Captain, your species moves at an endearing pace." As the alien craft rose into the Antarctic sky, Javier's smile faded. He tapped his concealed communicator once. "Observer departed. Commence Phase Omega. In 12 secure facilities around the world, quantum links activated simultaneously." The Etherian stirred, parts of it shifting between dimensions, testing boundaries that no species in the known galaxy had ever crossed. Dr. Valentina Sokolov stepped onto the command platform, facing the assembled Project Etherian team. For centuries, they have watched us struggle, fail, and struggle again. They've laughed at our primitive technology, our biological limitations, our fractious politics. She gestured to the dimensional viewport, where the Etherian pulsed with impossible energies. They believe they understand the boundaries of reality. They are wrong. While they watched our rockets explode, they missed what we were really building. Tiroi, ship's core flared with light that existed in more dimensions than the human eye could perceive. "They mock what they fear," Valentina continued. "And soon, they will fear what they've mocked." The countdown began. The awakening. The orbital defense grid above Earth lit up with warnings as the hegemony armada emerged from hyperspace. 57 capital ships, each larger than Manhattan, positioned themselves in a perfect containment formation. Smaller vessels, thousands of them, deployed in tactical arrays designed to overwhelm planetary defenses. In the United Nations Emergency Council chamber, representatives from Earth's nations watched in stunned silence As Supreme Executor Zixvar's image materialized above the central podium. "People of Earth," the alien began, its translator converting multi-tonal vibrations into human speech. "The galactic hegemony has determined your world has reached sufficient development to warrant formal annexation. Resistance is unnecessary and inadvisable. Your technological inferiority has been well documented." UN Secretary-General Thandiswa Mbeki stepped forward. "We request time to consider your terms, Supreme Executor." The crystalline being's facets shifted in what might have been amusement. "You have 6 Earth hours, though the outcome is predetermined." As the transmission ended, Colonel Darius Fletcher slammed his fist on the conference table. "They've been watching us for centuries, cataloging our weaknesses while feeding us scraps of technology to develop in predictable ways. They don't know about Ethereum," Secretary General Mbeki stated calmly. "And we're still debating whether to use it," Fletcher growled. "This is exactly the scenario it was built for." Dr. Valentina Sokolov's hologram appeared in the center of the room. "Ethereum isn't a weapon, Colonel. It's a dimensional vessel that manipulates fundamental reality. Once activated at full capacity, we cross a threshold from which there may be no return. The alternative is surrender to beings who see us as pets," Fletcher responded. Mbeki raised her hand for silence. "The global vote is still underway. Until then, conventional defenses only." Beneath Antarctica, Imani Okafor sat in the pilot's chamber, neural interfaces connecting her consciousness to the Ethereum systems. At 32, she was the most compatible candidate ever tested, her brain's unusual quantum entanglement, patterns allowing her to perceive multiple dimensional states simultaneously. "Final diagnostics complete," Dr. Hiroshi announced over the comm. "Imani, how do you feel?" She closed her eyes, sensing the ship's awareness brushing against her consciousness. "It's alive, somehow. Waiting." A proximity alert blared through the facility. On tactical displays, hegemony scout ships descended through the atmosphere, heading directly for Antarctica. "They know." Josephine Okoro's voice was tight with tension. "They've always known. The mockery was to keep us complacent while they monitored Project Ethereum." The facility shuddered as the first energy weapons struck the ice above. In the command center, Josephine received an encrypted transmission from Colonel Fletcher. His face was grim. "The vote is deadlocked. Politicians debating while the enemy is at our doorstep. I'm authorizing Ethereum launch now. This is a military decision." "That's not the protocol," Josephine began. "To hell with protocol. They're landing troops worldwide. This is an extinction-level event." Fletcher's eyes were hard. "Activate Ethereum, that's an order." Josephine turned to her team. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Initiate dimensional drive. Prepare for awakening." In the pilot chamber, Imani felt the ship's systems surge to life around her. The neural connection deepened, and suddenly her consciousness expanded, beyond the boundaries of conventional reality. "Oh my God," she whispered as her perception split across multiple dimensions simultaneously. She could see the timeline of the invasion stretching before and behind her like a physical object she could touch, modify, rewrite. The Ethereum's crystalline structure began to pulse with energies that defied the visible spectrum. Parts of the vessel phased in and out of conventional spacetime as it accessed higher dimensional planes. "Imani, can you hear me?" Dr. Hiroshi's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Yes," she replied, though she was no longer certain where her body ended and the ship began. "I can see everything. The invasion, the past leading to it, the futures branching from it." The facility rocked violently as hegemony forces breached the outer defenses. Alarms wailed throughout the complex. "We're out of time," Josephine announced. "Imani, take us up." With a thought, Imani directed the Ethereum upward. The vessel didn't move through space conventionally. Instead, it altered its dimensional position, simultaneously existing and not existing at different points in space-time. The Antarctic ice above them didn't melt or explode as the ship emerged. It simply parted as if it had never been solid, the molecular structure temporarily rearranged by the Ethereum's dimensional field. Supreme Executor Zixvar was receiving the surrender of Brazil when an aide interrupted with urgent news. Impossible energy readings from the southern continent. Something is emerging. The Etherian rose into Earth's sky, visible yet somehow difficult to focus on. Its form seemed to shift and change, parts of it extending into dimensions invisible to conventional perception. Light bent around it in impossible ways, and gravity rippled in its wake. In the pilot chamber, Imani opened her eyes, which now glowed with inner light that refracted across multiple dimensional planes. Through the Etherian, she could perceive the hegemony fleet not just as physical vessels, but as causal constructs, patterns of events and decisions leading to this moment. And she realized, with dawning wonder and terror, that she could change those patterns. The seventh dimension isn't about space, she whispered. It's about causality itself. As the hegemony's weapons locked onto the Etherian, Imani reached out with her newly awakened perception and touched the fabric of reality. You shouldn't have mocked us, she said, though no one but the ship could hear her. Now let me show you why. The Etherian began to glow with impossible light as it fully awakened to its purpose, and the galaxy's mockery prepared to transform into fear. The impossible. The hegemony flagship Eternal Dominion unleashed its primary weapon, a concentrated stream of exotic particles designed to disintegrate matter at the quantum level. Supreme Executor Zixvar watched with crystalline eyes as the beam struck the strange Earth vessel directly. The beam passed through the Etherian as if it weren't there. Impossible, Zixvar vibrated. Scan again. The vessel exists in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, reported Science Director Kalnar. Our weapons are interacting with only a fraction of its total existence. Aboard the Etherian, Imani Okafor experienced reality in ways no human ever had. Through the ship's 7th-dimensional interface, she perceived time not as a linear progression, but as a malleable medium. Events connected by threads of causality that could be rewoven. I can see the attack paths, she communicated to the command center. Not just where they are, but the decisions that led them here. The probability waves that determined their actions. Dr. Hiroshi's voice came through distorted, as if reaching her across a vast distance despite his physical proximity. Imani, we're detecting unprecedented dimensional warping. Your consciousness is spreading across multiple causal planes. I understand what we've built now, Imani replied. Her voice resonated strangely, echoing from multiple points in space-time simultaneously. The Etherian doesn't fight in battles, it rewrites them. She reached out with her expanded consciousness and touched the causal thread of the hegemony's first attack run. With a thought, she altered it. Not the present moment, but the decision made 3 hours earlier that had positioned the attack fleet in its current formation. Across Earth's skies, 200 hegemony fighters suddenly vanished. Not destroyed, they had never been deployed. The attack pattern they had formed simply ceased to exist as the timeline adjusted to the altered causality. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, alarms blared as tactical displays flickered and reset. Where is Attack Squadron Vorpal? Demanded Fleet Commander Draxer. What squadron? His second-in-command replied, confusion evident in his resonance patterns. We decided against deploying lighter craft in the initial wave. That's not... Draxer stopped, his crystalline form clouding with uncertainty. Did we? I distinctly remember ordering their deployment. The logs show no such order, the second-in-command confirmed. Zixvar's form pulsed with agitation. The Earth vessel is manipulating our perception of events. Not perception, Science Director Kalnar corrected, her tone revealing growing horror. It's manipulating the events themselves, retroactively. Imani pushed deeper into the 7th dimension, her consciousness expanding further. She could now perceive not just the immediate battle, but the entire invasion strategy, a complex web of decisions, preparations, and contingencies spanning decades of hegemony planning. With surgical precision, she located a critical planning session that had occurred 2 years earlier, a meeting where the decision to develop specialized weapons for Earth's magnetic field had been made. She inserted a subtle doubt in one admiral's mind, a question about resource allocation that led to the project's postponement. Throughout the hegemony fleet, weapon systems specifically designed to disrupt Earth's magnetosphere suddenly transformed. The specialized components had never been installed. The project had been delayed indefinitely due to budget constraints and technical concerns raised at a meeting 2 years ago. "They're rewriting history," Kalnar whispered, watching as tactical systems throughout the fleet reconfigured to reflect the altered timeline. Not our memories of it, history itself. Imani didn't stop there. The Etherian moved through Earth's atmosphere without conventional propulsion, shifting its dimensional position to appear instantly at new coordinates. With each manifestation, she rewrote another thread of causality, erasing attack formations, canceling weapons developments, inserting mechanical failures that had always been present. In the Antarctic Command Center, the monitoring team watched in awe as the tactical display showed hegemony ships breaking formation, some retreating without apparent cause. "What exactly is she doing?" Josephine asked, her voice hushed. Dr. Hiroshi studied the dimensional readings with wide eyes. "She's not fighting them in the present. She's unwriting their invasion from the fabric of reality, changing the decisions that led to this moment." Colonel Fletcher stared at the display. "Can she alter any past event?" "There are constraints," Hiroshi explained. "Major historical nexus points resist change. They're too deeply embedded in the causal structure. But smaller decisions, planning sessions, equipment choices, these can be modified with minimal timeline resistance." The Etherian approached the hegemony flagship, phasing in and out of conventional visibility. Inside the pilot chamber, Imani focused on Supreme Executor Zixavar, perceiving not just his physical form but his entire timeline, every decision that had led him to command this invasion. She reached for a moment 6 months earlier when Zixavar had reviewed intelligence on Earth's defenses. In the original timeline, the reports had convinced him of Earth's vulnerability. Imani inserted a data point, a mysterious energy reading from Antarctica that suggested unknown technology. On the flagship's bridge, Zixavar suddenly froze mid-command. "Wait," he said, facets flashing with confusion. "I remember concerns about unusual energy signatures from the southern continent. Why did we proceed without investigating further?" His advisors looked at each other in bewilderment. "We conducted a full investigation," one finally said. "The results were inconclusive, which is why you ordered the invasion delayed by 6 months for additional reconnaissance." "This invasion was scheduled for last December," another confirmed. "Don't you remember ordering the postponement, Supreme?" "Executor?" Zixavar's crystalline form clouded with uncertainty. "Of course," he said slowly. "How could I forget such a significant decision?" The Etherian now hovered directly before the massive flagship, its form shifting between dimensions, parts of it visible only as distortions in space-time. Imani extended her consciousness directly into the command center of the hegemony fleet. "You came to conquer," her voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere. "But you failed to understand what we have become. We are no longer bound by your perception of reality." Zixavar's form pulsed with a mixture of rage and fear. "What have you done to my fleet?" "Nothing that hasn't always been," Imani replied. "The failures, the doubts, the miscalculations, they were always there. I simply emphasized them." She reached out once more, touching the causal threads of the hegemony homeworlds, not to attack them, merely to introduce subtle environmental anomalies, unexplained phenomena that would begin appearing in the coming weeks. Signs that would be unmistakable to a species that understood dimensional science. Earth could reach them anywhere, anytime. "Return to your worlds," Imani commanded, "and take this message. Earth is no longer your mockery. We have awakened to the true nature of reality, and we will not be conquered." As the Etherian pulsed with impossible energies, the hegemony fleet began to withdraw, not in defeat but in growing existential terror of what humanity had unleashed. Part 4. The Galactic Assembly convened an emergency session for the first time in 7,000 years. Representatives from over 300 civilizations gathered in the vast chamber, their usual hierarchical seating abandoned as ancient enemies sat side by side, united by a common fear. Ambassador Vreel of the Solarian Compact addressed the silent chamber. The intelligence is confirmed. Earth has developed and deployed a 7th-dimensional vessel capable of manipulating causality itself. A wave of murmurs rippled through the assembly. For centuries, we watched them struggle with primitive technology, continued Vreel, her luminous form dimming with distress. We categorized them as a Type 0.7 civilization, barely able to harness their planet's resources, centuries from achieving dimensional manipulation. We were wrong, stated Elder Khansha of the Quorras, his ancient voice resonating through the Ao chamber. The Quorras were among the oldest species in the galaxy, observers of cosmic events for millions of years. The humans concealed their true progress while we mocked their apparent limitations. Footage from the hegemony encounter played above the assembly. The Etherian appeared as a shifting, impossible object, parts of it blinking in and out of conventional reality as it rewrote the very fabric of history around it. The hegemony invasion force has been completely withdrawn, reported a military advisor. Supreme Executor Zixvar reports tactical anomalies throughout the fleet, weapon systems that were never completed, strategic decisions that were always different from what commanders remember ordering. Elder Khansha's massive form shifted uneasily. This is merely the beginning. Our long-range sensors detect dimensional ripples spreading outward from Earth. The humans are testing the extent of their influence. On the hegemony homeworld of Crystallis Prime, Supreme Executor Zixvar stood before the High Council, his normally perfect crystalline form showing stress fractures. They didn't just defeat us, he explained, voice resonating with residual fear. They unmade our victory before it could occur. My memories contain strategies we implemented, but the records show different decisions that I apparently made months ago. High Counselor Vexmore's facets darkened. How do we fight an enemy that can change our decisions before we make them? We don't, Zixvar replied simply. That's why I've ordered a complete diplomatic reversal. We must establish peaceful relations with Earth immediately. Aboard the Etherian, now orbiting Earth at the dimensional convergence point between the third and fourth planes, Imani Okafor struggled with her expanding consciousness. Her physical form remained in the pilot chamber, but her mind existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Her neural patterns are evolving, Dr. Hiroshi explained to the Emergency Council. The 7th-dimensional exposure is changing how her brain processes information. She's perceiving time as a spatial dimension she can navigate at will. Is she still human? Colonel Fletcher asked bluntly. Dr. Valentina Sokolov's weathered face revealed nothing. That's becoming a philosophical question. Inside the dimensional interface, Imani perceived the ripples of terror spreading across the galaxy. Species that had once dismissed humans as primitive now recoiled from the power they had unleashed. She could see potential futures branching outward, timelines where fear led to desperate preemptive strikes against Earth, others where civilizations offered immediate technological tribute to appease the new power. They're afraid, she communicated to the command center, her voice simultaneously coming from the ship's systems and from thin air around the room. I can see their fear spreading across time and space. Good, Colonel Fletcher responded. Fear will keep them from attempting another invasion. No, Imani countered. Fear will drive them to desperation. I can see probable timelines where they attempt to destroy Earth rather than risk our power spreading. In her expanded perception, Imani watched as diplomatic envoys from across the galaxy prepared to approach Earth, not with demands or threats, but with pleas. The first arrived within 48 hours, a delegation from the ancient Quorras, beings who had mastered 5-dimensional travel eons ago but had abandoned higher-dimensional research after glimpsing the dangers it posed. Elder Khansha stood before the United Nations, his massive form requiring a specially constructed platform. We come not as conquerors or supplicants, but as witnesses to what you have awakened. The 7th dimension is not merely another plane of existence. It is the dimension of causality itself. To manipulate it is to risk the coherence of reality. Secretary General Mbeki maintained a diplomatic stance. The Etherian was developed as a defensive measure after centuries of mockery and dismissal from advanced civilizations like yours, Elder. A failing for which we now pay the price, Khonsha acknowledged. But hear me. Long ago, the precursor civilization achieved what you have. They manipulated causality through 7th-Dimensional technology. The resulting cascade of temporal contradictions created what you call the scattering nebula, 50,000 star systems where causality itself broke down. Nothing lives there still, after 2 million years. As diplomatic exchanges continued on Earth, Imani's connection to conventional humanity continued to fade. Her consciousness expanded further into the dimensional planes, perceiving not just the present galactic situation, but its myriad potential outcomes across probable timelines. In the Antarctic facility, Dr. Valentina Sokolov sat alone by Imani's physical form, now suspended in a field of dimensional energy within the pilot chamber. You still hear me as me? Valentina asked softly. Not as a node in causality, but as the person who selected you for this program. Imani's physical eyes opened, glowing with inner light that refracted across multiple dimensional planes. I perceive you across all possible versions of yourself, Doctor. The you that exists now, the you that might have existed if different choices were made, the you that will exist in probable futures. But do you still care about us? About humanity? Valentina pressed. Or are we becoming abstractions? To you? For a moment, Imani's expression became fully human again, vulnerability showing through the godlike perception. I'm afraid, she admitted. I'm losing myself in the patterns. Sometimes I forget which timeline is real and which are merely probable. Sometimes I forget I was ever just Imani. Valentina reached for her hand but stopped short of the dimensional field. We need you to remember. Whatever else you become, remember what it means to be human. Across the galaxy, civilizations that had once mocked Earth now watched in terror as their long-range sensors detected the dimensional ripples emanating from the Etherian. Military vessels were withdrawn from Earth's stellar neighborhood. First contact protocols were hastily rewritten. Species that had been at war for millennia established temporary truces to address the human question. The mockery had transformed into fear. But fear, Imani realized as she perceived the branching timelines ahead, was just as dangerous as contempt. In her expanded consciousness, she could see that humanity stood at a crucial nexus point. One path leading to dominance through terror, another to something previously unimagined in galactic history. As diplomatic envoys from 50 civilizations approached Earth, Imani made her decision. Not just for the present, but for all probable futures she could perceive. We need to show them something they don't expect, she communicated to Earth's leaders. Not more power, not more fear. What then? Colonel Fletcher demanded. Through her dimensional perception, Imani smiled. Something truly alien to them, restraint. The balance 6 months after the hegemony's failed invasion, representatives from 178 galactic civilizations gathered in the newly constructed Dimensional Accord Hall in Geneva. The massive structure, designed with architectural principles from dozens of worlds, symbolized Earth's new status in the interstellar community. Neither conqueror nor subject, but something unprecedented. Secretary General Mbeki stood before the assembled delegates, her dignified presence commanding respect. Today, we establish new principles for galactic cooperation, not based on technological superiority or military might, but on mutual recognition of sovereignty and potential. The Etherian hovered above the gathering, visible through the transparent ceiling. Its form still shifted between dimensions, parts of it appearing and disappearing as it existed simultaneously across multiple planes of reality. But its movements were now contained, controlled, a demonstration of power held deliberately in check. Elder Khonsha of the Quaras inclined his ancient form in acknowledgement. For millions of years, galactic civilization has operated on principles of dominance. Advanced species either conquered or patronized emerging ones, Earth has offered a third path. Colonel Fletcher, now Earth's defense coordinator, watched from the sidelines, his expression revealing his continued skepticism. They only respect us because they fear us, he muttered to Dr. Valentina Sokolov. Perhaps, she replied. But fear alone creates only temporary advantages. What Imani has shown us creates something sustainable. In the 6 months since the awakening, the Etherian had demonstrated its capabilities in carefully measured ways. When pirates from the Cygnus Reach attacked a human research outpost, the ship didn't destroy them. It simply rewrote the causal thread that had led them to piracy in the first place. Their society restructured around scientific research instead of raiding, a change that had always been that way according to their own historical records. When a devastating supernova threatened a populated system without evacuation capability, the Etherian altered the star's ignition sequence, not preventing the eventual explosion, but delaying it by precisely 200 years, enough time for the civilization to develop the necessary technology to save themselves. Earth had shown the galaxy that it could rewrite reality itself, and then chosen not to use that power for dominance. Inside the dimensional interface of the Etherian, Imani existed in a state beyond conventional humanity. Her consciousness spanned multiple dimensions, perceiving the flow of causality throughout the galaxy. Yet she had found a way to maintain her connection to her human origins. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, now showing the effects of advanced age, worked with her daily to maintain that connection. Focus on the emotional threads, he reminded her during their sessions, not just the causal ones. I can see so many possibilities, Imani replied, her voice resonating from multiple points in space-time, simultaneously. Timelines where we used the Etherian to establish human dominance, others where we withdrew from galactic affairs entirely. But you chose this path, Hiroshi reminded her. Why? Because mockery and fear are two sides of the same failure, the failure to recognize mutual potential. Through her expanded perception, Imani had glimpsed something few beings in the galaxy had ever seen: the possible futures where diverse civilizations collaborated rather than competed. In the Accord Hall, Supreme Executor Zix Var, now serving as the hegemony's diplomatic representative, approached the Earth delegation. His crystalline form had been reconstructed, the stress fractures healed. We underestimated humanity, he acknowledged to Dr. Valentina. Not just your technological capabilities, but your restraint. When you gained the power to rewrite our societies, you chose not to. Restraint is not weakness, Valentina replied. It's the highest form of strength. The Dimensional Accord established new principles for interstellar relations. Technology would be shared rather than hoarded. Emerging civilizations would be welcomed rather than mocked. And the manipulation of causality itself would be governed by strict protocols, with the Etherian serving not as a weapon but as a stabilizing force. Earth, once the mockery of advanced species, had transformed galactic civilization not through conquest, but through the unexpected power of measured response. As the accord was formalized, Imani manifested a partial physical presence in the hall, her form shifting between solidity and dimensional translucence, existing simultaneously in multiple states of being. The seventh dimension showed me that reality is not fixed, she addressed the gathered representatives, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones of multiple timeline frequencies. Causality can be rewritten, but that doesn't mean it should be, except to create balance where there was none. Elder Kunshaw approached her, his ancient eyes perceiving more of her multidimensional existence than most. You have become something new, he observed. Neither fully human nor fully transcendent. A bridge, Imani agreed. Between what humanity was and what it might become, between Earth and the galaxy, between causality and possibility. In the years that followed, Earth established itself as neither ruler nor subject in galactic affairs, but as something unprecedented, a nexus point where diverse civilizations could converge. The mockery was forgotten. The fear faded. In their place grew something previously unknown in the galaxy's long history: mutual respect between evolutionarily disparate species. The Etherian remained, its seventh-dimensional capabilities a reminder of humanity's potential. But it was rarely deployed for major interventions. Instead, Imani used her expanded consciousness to identify critical nexus points in causality, moments where small, subtle changes could prevent conflicts before they began or guide civilizations away from self-destruction. Dr. Valentina Sokolov, in the final year of her long life, stood with Colonel Fletcher on the observation deck of the newly constructed Lunar Diplomatic Center, watching Earth rotate slowly below them. "Was this your plan all along?" Fletcher asked her. "When you started Project Etherian 30 years ago?" Valentina smiled faintly. "No one could have planned this outcome. We built the ship to ensure humanity's survival in a hostile galaxy. Imani transformed it into something more." "She's barely human anymore," Fletcher observed, watching as Imani's form shifted between dimensions nearby, parts of her consciousness simultaneously present in diplomatic sessions across the galaxy. "She's more human than ever," Valentina countered. "She could have become a god, rewriting reality to suit her whims. Instead, she chose to use her power to create balance. What could be more human than that choice?" In the dimensional interface of the Etherian, Imani perceived the branching timelines extending from this moment. Countless possible futures stemming from the nexus point humanity had created. In many of those futures, she saw civilizations that had once mocked Earth now studying its philosophical and cultural contributions with the same intensity they had once reserved for advanced technology. The mockery had transformed to fear, and fear had transformed to respect. But beyond respect lay something more valuable: partnership across the vast diversity of galactic life. Earth would never again be the joke of the galaxy. The Etherian had ensured that. But Imani had ensured something more important, that Earth would not simply become what it had once feared. Not conqueror, not tyrant, not the source of a new mockery directed at less advanced worlds. Instead, humanity had awakened to its full potential, and then chosen to use that potential with wisdom. The seventh dimension had shown Imani that reality was mutable, that history itself could be rewritten. But the most important lesson came not from dimensional science, but from humanity's long struggle to rise above its limitations. The greatest power was not the ability to change reality, but the wisdom to know when to let it unfold on its own. As new civilizations emerged from their homeworlds across the galaxy, they no longer faced mockery from advanced species. Instead, they found mentors and partners waiting to welcome them to a community built on mutual recognition of potential, a legacy of the time when Earth, once mocked by the galaxy, transformed fear into something greater after the seventh-dimensional ship awoke.